Very good afternoon. Selamat siang. My name is Ron Ho. I'm a senior systems engineer for F5 Networks. Okay. As we know, as all of us know, cloud actually helps with provides flexibility, simplicity, to actually enable our application to be deployed very quickly and also in a very fast manner. Okay. So, as we embark our journey into cloud, okay, your applications potentially will be deployed in a multi-cloud environment, whether is it a private cloud, a public cloud, a software as a service, or even a hybrid cloud. With that, when your applications are deployed in a multi-cloud environment, security actually needs to be prioritized, okay? The importance of security has increased tremendously. If you imagine our border or our boundaries, okay, our boundaries has been extended, our borders has also been shifted. Our traditional security parameters are no longer within your own data center. When you embark on a cloud journey, your applications potentially will be hosted in a private cloud location, in a co-location site. And that's where security, how do we ensure a consistent security policies? How can we ensure that we have what we call it as an effective and consistent security? And with F5 today, I would like to give you some background, and my conversation and my presentation will be around how can we actually help you to reduce your risk with a very app-centric approach. But before I touch on application-centric security or application-centric defense and protection, let us understand what are the application-centric threats that we have today. And not to forget, application attacks are responsible for some of the biggest breaches that we see today. Okay? Firstly, application cannot be deployed as itself. It will typically require what we call it as an application infrastructure components, where when you deploy applications, you will have your network, you will have your DNS, you will have your servers deployed together. So these are what we call it, the network, the DNS servers, and as well as your OS are called the infrastructure component for your application. These infrastructure components are a threat to your applications as well, because hackers are actually looking to actually bring down your application infrastructure components like your network and your DNS to ensure that your applications is out of service. An application itself is also open to threats, like the Open Web Application Security Top 10 threats, things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, and also things like credential stuffing. So these are threats to your application. And as we move towards the current and as well as the near future, a lot of banks' transactions are being carried out in what we call it as digital currency, okay? A lot of transactions are being done virtually online, okay? And when that happens, imagine the threat landscape has actually shifted as well, where malwares are being hooked onto your browsers, trying to steal your credentials, trying to steal the important information within your user. And not only that, the malware will actually perform automated transaction, false transaction, to actually try to steal and siphon your money. And why is that happening is because there is a shift of what we call it as an attack framework. Those days, you have one hacker sitting behind a laptop trying to compromise the system. But today, that hacker has developed tools and their own botnet army to actually help to automate this process so that they can actually launch a coordinated attacks. Later on, I will have a section to talk about IoT security and also the evolution of botnet armies. And as we go up into, as we actually talk about attacks, hackers are actually thinking out of the box as well, okay? You're no longer, it's not only they're attacking your application. When we talk about multi-layer threats or multi-layer attacks, attackers can actually launch, say, a denial of service attack to your network, but that is just a smoke screen. Smoke screen means it's just to distract you. But actually, behind the scene, they may be also attacking your DNS server, trying to poison your DNS cache, and eventually targeting your applications, your sensitive information, and your data that is actually hosted behind your applications. And what has made it more and more challenging is all these attacks are actually hidden within an encrypted channel. Today, out in the internet, more than 70% of the traffics are encrypted. When all these traffics are encrypted, and traditionally your firewall, your IPS, do not do any decryption, what will happen? All these attacks are actually hidden, okay? Within SSL traffics, within encrypted channels. And I know some of you may be embarking on your journey to the cloud, and if you're thinking, well, I'm going to the public cloud, I'm going to Amazon, AWS, Azure, okay? Hey, I'm outsourcing my security responsibility to someone else, okay? So I'm safe. Let me enlighten you with this slide, okay? This slide was actually built, and it's word by word extracted from Amazon AWS website. It is called Cloud Shared Security Responsibility Model, where Amazon, AWS, and any public cloud providers stated very clearly that they will provide security of the cloud, but the security in the cloud, okay? Security in the cloud means whatever applications, data, sensitive information that you put in the cloud, it is actually the customer, your responsibility, okay? So subscribing or putting your workload or application in a public cloud doesn't mean that you're outsourcing the responsibility of the security to the public cloud provider. Okay? It is still your responsibility to secure the application and as well as data. And I'm going to shift a gear to talk about the next generation of attacks, the rise of the botnet armies, and what we call it as IoT, okay? Internet of Things. You have heard of, just now, my colleague Kay mentioned about IoT getting more and more rampant, more and more users. Today, based on the research published by Gartner, there's about 8.6 billion devices, IoT devices, which is massive. And before I talk about IoT threats, let me bring you through I would say, the evolution of attacks. It starts off with a hacker, one hacker sitting behind a PC trying to compromise a system. And then what happened is that hacker actually built his own tool to help to automate some of these attacks. Okay? And that didn't end. The evolution takes place such that the hackers got to know other hackers. They have their own community of hackers. And that's where the community expands to other geographical locations as well. And that's where you actually heard of distributed attacks, distributed denial of service that are being launched by this attacker. And recently, I'm sure you have read about 3 years ago, they came out with 3 or more years ago, they actually came out with things like DDoS for rent, DDoS for hire, okay? I can rent a botnet army to launch denial of service attacks, okay? $50 for 1 hour, I can launch up to 100 gigabits per second of traffic, okay? Which is massive. But today, what strikes fear in many of us, okay, in many of the end customers, whether you're enterprise or even telco, the next generation of botnet armies, on the next generation of attack infrastructures, rely on what we call it as the IoT. Okay? And if you see, there are 8.6 billion IoT devices out there in the world. Your fridge, your TV, your mobile devices, routers, IP cameras, all these are Internet of Things. All these are devices that are connected to the Internet. So what happened is F5 Labs is actually our research and threat intelligence center. We have done actually massive research on this topic. Last year, in 2016, July, we actually published a research paper that talks about the next generation of attacks, where we predicted that IoT device will be the new sets of botnet army, and it will actually go way above the world record. And true enough, within 2-3 months after what we have published, I'm sure you have heard of the Mirai botnet. The Mirai botnet came about, okay, where the first attack generated up to 600 gigabits per second of traffic. And a few weeks after that, a new world record was set with over 1 terabits per second attack was actually launched by IoT devices. And the scary part, subsequently, F5 also had a volume 2, and also recently we launched volume 3 of the research paper, where we talk about how we actually hunt the IoT devices and where are all these attacks coming from. Anyone want to guess which country actually has the most IoT devices that actually started all these attacks? Well, I think it's quite simple. It's from China. So as what my colleague mentioned, Kay mentioned, even bicycles are also a potential IoT devices, right? So you imagine the number of IoT devices that you potentially can be used as a botnet army to threaten your network and your infrastructure, okay? And the scariest part about Mirai was the author of Mirai, or the creator of Mirai, actually released the source code out to the internet. So we are predicting 1 terabits per second is actually the beginning, okay? You will see a much higher denial of service attacks, higher bandwidth attacks, I mean, in the very near future. And in F5 Labs, we didn't stop our research there in terms of hunt for IoT, but we have also researched on protocol adoption. With the new HTTP2 protocol adoption, it actually drives the adoption of encrypted services or encrypted channels. HTTPS requests is over 51% of the traffic in the internet, okay? And with HTTP2 in place, you will need to run high-level encryption like TLS 1.2, and also elliptic curve cryptography. So what does that mean? That means that in your defenses, you need to have a high-performance solution to actually help you to decrypt all this traffic so that you'll be able to know. Because ultimately, there is a huge increase of attacks that is going through an encrypted channel. So for those of you who are keen to find out more, I'll urge you, using your mobile phone or even your laptop, go to f5labs.com. And that's where you will see all these quarterly reports being published out. And it's not only quarterly report, you'll be able to find blogs by security experts and also some topics that are on top of typical CIO as well as CISO, the head of IT security's mind. So all these are published at a very low level in terms of technical level, as well as all the way articles that addresses CISO's pain points, okay? And when you're at f5labs.com, I will urge you to register your email address as well for updates, so that on a weekly basis and as well as on a monthly basis, we'll send you updates about threats so that you will have knowledge, you will gain knowledge and gain awareness on the threat landscape that is actually happening worldwide, okay? So one so let me move a gear from talking about threat landscape, application threats, to what I want to introduce you to this term called attack surfaces. Okay? What are attack surfaces? Attack surface are actually different points of where an attacker can actually access your applications, your data, and your sensitive information. Before your application is hosted in the cloud, traditionally, you have your data center. And where is your point of access? Typically, it's your internet gateway. Okay? So hackers can only go through a path, or probably you have multiple internet gateway. So you know where to secure your applications. But with the rise of the cloud, applications are being hosted not only in the public cloud, in Docker containers, different type of environments. You're actually exposing what we call it as your attack surface. Okay? Your threat landscape has actually suddenly expanded. And with the next generation of application architectures, like microservices, nano segmentations, as well as APIs, these are what we call it as new avenues of attack landscapes. Okay? So what happened is, let me talk about the banks across ASEAN and even locally in Indonesia. Banks are looking at what we call it as fintech, okay? Open banking, where we allow API calls to be consumed by the fintech partners. But isn't that a new avenue of attacks or threats for the attackers? It is. So it is no longer securing your internet gateway. It's securing all these backdoor connection. It's securing your extranet network. It's about securing where your application is sitting, whether it's sitting within your local data center, in a private cloud, or in a public cloud. So therefore, our core belief is always about applications are the gateway to your sensitive information. Applications are the gateway to your data. Secure your applications, then you will secure your data and the sensitive information. Now, I've talked about app-centric threats, as well as the different attack surfaces which has expanded. I want to bring to your attention of what are the foundation of an app-centric protection. Okay? There are three elements in the foundation of an app-centric protection. These three elements, very quickly, are about visibility, are about understanding the contents, the context, and the behavior of your application, and how you can actually put in controls. Okay? So in other words, you can picture it as, oops, sorry. You can picture it as, if I do not have visibility, how am I going to see my traffic? If I do not have the context, how do I understand what is being transversing across my network? And without control, how do I stop all these attacks from happening? When we dive in a bit deeper in terms of visibility, visibility is not only about seeing unencrypted traffic. It's about having visibility to where your applications are being hosted. Is it on-premise or is it in the cloud? And also, visibility is about the capability of you to decrypt complicated ciphers that are actually running. For example, today, in terms of SSL, many people are actually converging into using TLS 1.2 with elliptic curve cryptography. How can you do a real-time decryption and encryption without impacting the performance of your application, without impacting the performance of your traffic, and without impacting the user experience that is accessing your applications? And don't forget, when it comes to real-time encryption and decryption, it will actually make your traditional security devices obsolete. Things like firewall, IPS, APT, data leakage prevention, antivirus solution are not able to see what is inside an encrypted channel. And once you have visibility, the next thing to note is about the context and the behavior. But the context and the behavior is not only about the context and the behavior of the application. You need to look at who is accessing you, the context of the user, who the user is. Has he been authenticated? Has he been authorized? What type of authorization does the user have? Okay? What type of device is the user using to access you? Is he using a browser or is he using a mobile application? What patch level is his operating system? Where is he coming from? Is he coming from locally in Indonesia or other geographical location? That is user context. With that in mind, we'll look at the application context. How healthy is my application? Is my application up and running? Okay. The context of application is also talking about, is my application being stressed? Is my server being stressed? Okay. And also, what are the data that is hosted behind the application? Is it what we call it as a high, potentially high priority type of application? Is it hosting sensitive information? And with that, we move on to the other context, which is the network and the cloud context. Typically, when you host certain applications, say in a public cloud, you will have a baseline of security, a very generic security policy deployed. But is that sufficient? Because each application behaves differently. So normally, you may need to put your own fine-tuning, your own application security on top of that. And last but not least, we talk about visibility, context, and behavior. How do we put control to ensure that threats can be mitigated? Firstly, with control, you can actually put in an anti-DDoS solution where we are able to actually mitigate layer 3 all the way to layer 7 attacks. And a web application firewall to help mitigate against web application threats like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery. Then you also need a high-performance solution to help you encrypt and decrypt the traffic, which is related to SSL and TLS security. Not only we prevent SSL renegotiation attack, but with this, you're able to see your traffic. You're able to see your traffic in clear text so that the attacks that is actually traversing through an encrypted channel, you'll be able to react to that. And how you can actually put in an anti-fraud solution to detect for any malwares, any behavioral malwares that actually is trying to siphon financial or should I say transaction within your transactions. And also, how can we put in a DNS security to ensure your DNS cache is not being poisoned and your DNS is actually available in service as not being attacked. And last but not least, control is about controlling the end users that are coming in as well. How can we actually provide identity and also federated access, single sign-on, confirm who the user is based on the context of the user, okay? And with this foundation, as I mentioned, the foundation of app security is built based on these 3 elements. When you have these 3 elements in your infrastructure, that is where you can slowly expand to 3 other things, which is your architecture, the people, and the process. Okay? Once you have the foundation 3 elements that I mentioned, you will be able to look at what type of architecture you can actually invest in. Are you investing in a point solution? Are you investing in multiple tiers or different brands of firewalls to provide your protections? And then we talk about the people. The people actually touch upon what I mentioned about F5 Labs as well. It's not only the people in your organization, but who can you leverage upon? Experts that you can leverage upon in the industry to help you with research as well as intelligence, threat intelligence service. And together with your SOC that you have set up, how can you actually analyze some of these attacks? With deep analysis or deep analytics, you'll be able to analyze when the attack was done, and potentially you'll be able to even analyze when an attack that is going to happen, to predict an attack. And last but not least, in terms of the process, you can set up something called like a catalog of app protection services for a multi-cloud deployment. So with that in mind, we started this conversation by talking about a multi-cloud deployment, deploying in Azure, AWS, potentially in a public cloud, private cloud, even in a hybrid cloud. So the conversation that I spoke about brings us to how do we secure our sensitive information when our applications are deployed on all these clouds. The most important about security is the security should follow where the application is. And that's where F5 will be able to help you. Our solution ensures that no matter your application is hosted on-premise, in a co-location, or even in a public cloud, you can ensure that we provide an effective and also a consistent security policy. And as I mentioned, let me recap. Our boundaries has changed. Our borders has been extended, and our security parameters has been stretched, and it's no longer within our own data center, but it has been stretched all the way to wherever you deploy your applications, whether it's in a public cloud, private cloud, or whatnot. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation.